What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next we are going to talk about the top 10 comic sales last week. Stay tuned. Alright, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. So this week I'm going to do a slightly different version of the top 10. This is focused on the Promise Collection Pedigree. That sale ended this last week, and so I'm going to go over the sales numbers for that as well as the top 10 books from that sale. Now, one other thing I'm going to do is I did purchase a Promise Collection book, not from the sale, but from one of the weekly sales, so I'm going to open that about halfway through this video as well, so get to kind of take a look at one of the Promise Collection books as part of this video. Now, with this Promise Collection sale, there were actually some books that I felt like went for some pretty reasonable prices. The last sale, the first big sale, the prices were extremely high, very high averages. I'll go over those in a little bit. But this one, for example, that Detective Comics 39 that I talked about before, so that's the second appearance of Robin. That one, it was a 4.5 and sold for $4,320, and I felt that was right about fair market value for that book. So based on what we had been seeing for this Promise collection, where books were selling for 50, 100, 200% over their fair market value, this one was right in line. So that was a pretty surprising sale to see. So I think someone got a great deal on that book. Now, I want to go over some sales numbers first from this Promise collection, because the prices for these books are very impressive. Now, this one was not as strong as the first sale that was held. Now, this sale, there were 410 books. The first sale that they had, there were 274. The total value of the books for this sale were $3,501,120, which is a lot of money. That is a lot of money. But the last sale for those 274 books, so less books, was $7,925,400. So less than half the total sales, with way more books, with about 50% more books. So just says that the sale prices in that first one were significantly higher. Now, this Promise Collection sale was broken into 2 days. The first day, there were 172 books that sold. These are the books that sell with an actual auctioneer. They're not automated in any way. And this is generally where you see the higher priced books. And the total sales for that first set of 172 books were $2,535,460. So that is a big percentage of the total sales of that 3.5 million in total sales. The average sale price for those books, $14,683, and that is a lot. That is a high number, but the last sale, the average sales price for that first day was $39,227. So definitely a drop in the average sales price. Now, I'm not really surprised about this, because I did mention that in the prior sale, it was a lot more high-end books, a lot of these 9.8, 9.6 Golden Age books. This one had a lot more what I called filler type books, so I was expecting the average sales price to be lower in this sale. Now, the second day had quite a few books. It had 238 books just on that second day. Its total sales value was $975,660, so an average price of $4,099. The last sale, the average price for that second day was $9,210. So again, pretty big drop in comparison between those the first Promise Collection sale and the second one. Now, the average for both days was $8,539. The average for the last sale for both days was $28,925. So there were a few things, I think, going on with that first sale. There was a lot of hype around that collection, so I think people were maybe paying a little more than they have been, because we've been seeing more and more of these Promise Collection books coming out. But it was also just an average of higher end books. You had a lot of these early Captain America, Human Torch books that were in these really high grades. There was a lot less of that in this sale. The other one also had a lot of high grade Detective Comics, Joker covers. This one didn't have nearly as much of that, and so that is why I think the average sale was lower in this auction. Now, this collection does consist of about 5,000 books, so I still think it is very possible that the total sales for this collection is going to exceed $50 million. I think it's going to be up there. Now, during the weekly sales, you do see quite a few lower priced books where they aren't even breaking the $1,000 mark. So these bigger auctions, the ones where they're having these signature type auctions, you definitely see the higher end books, the more expensive books. So the overall average for these books, I don't think is going to be quite as high as what we see for these bigger sales, but I still think very reasonable that this could get into that $50 million type range, because there are still a lot of big books that we haven't seen yet. For example, I follow one of the people at Heritage on Instagram, and they recently showed a Batman 1 and a Captain America Comics #1 that are part of this collection. So those types of books are going to go for a huge amount of money, even though they're in lower grades, but those are definitely going to be really big money books. Now, if you're wondering what the cheapest books in this auction were, it just broke $1,000. I thought there would be some that might go under $1,000, but it ended up none of them went under $1,000. The cheapest was $1,020, and there were two different books that had that honor. The first one was a CGC 9.2 of Boy Comics #21, and this is the second highest graded copy on the census. There is 196 out there from the Mile High collection, and so still an impressive book, but $1,020. The last sale, the least expensive book was $3,120. So again, that average was definitely on the lower end with this auction than it was with the first one. Now, the second book that also shared that honor was Boy Commandos #34 in a CGC 9.6. Now, this is the highest graded copy. However, it's not a book that there's a lot of demand for. There's not going to be a lot of these books out there because there's only 4 on the census. Just people aren't really getting them graded. But still, highest graded book on the census, and a 9.6 for Golden Age book is always impressive. So that was the other book that sold for just over $1,000 at $1,020. Now, there are way too many books, like I said, about 410 books in this auction for me to talk about. So what I decided to do is, like I said, I'm going to go over the top 10 sales. And in this auction, that happens to be all the books that sold for over $40,000. Now, this is where you can really see the difference between this auction and the last one. Because in the last auction, there were 13 books that went over $100,000. And there were even 4 that went over $200,000. In this auction, like I said, just 10, and that was going over $40,000. And out of these, only 2 of those books broke $100,000, and none of them went over $200,000. So definitely didn't have those really, really high-end, expensive books that we saw in the first Promise Collection sale, but still some very expensive books, 10 books over 40 grand. All right, so with that, let's get started. I'm going to go through the top 10, starting at number 10 and going up to number 1. So number 10 was a CGC 9.8 of Human Torch #23. This is a classic Golden Age Alex Schomburg robot cover from 1946. It sold for $40,800. Now, this is the single highest graded copy on the census. So this is a very high grade book, a 9.8 from 1946. There is 1 in a 9.6. There are 4 in a 9.4. So there are quite a few copies that are up there, that are in the high 9s for a Golden Age book. Now, this one just squeaked into the top 10. It's number 10, but I'm not really surprised that it made it up there, because these Golden Age robot covers, just right around the World War II era, from Alex Schomburg as well, it's going to be a very in-demand book. I would have thought it might have gone for a little bit more, being a 9.8 and Alex Schomburg cover, but it is what it is. Sold for $40,800, and so still a very impressive sale. Now, number 9 was a CGC 7.5 of Detective Comics #58. And I've mentioned this comic in the past. It's a really unassuming cover, but it is a very important book. This is the first appearance of the Penguin. So he's a character that has his first Silver Age appearance in, I believe it's Batman 155, but this is his first appearance in the Golden Age, his actual first appearance. And it unfortunately fits that mold of the kind of crappy Golden Age first appearance covers where he's not actually on the cover. It's just basically a cover of a boat with Batman and Robin on it. But it had a big sale. It was $44,400, which is a new record in that grade. The prior record in this grade was $33,600 in November of last year. And it's not the highest graded copy on the census. There are a total of 89 copies on the census, 4 in a 7.5. there are actually 5 copies graded higher than this one, 2 graded at a 9.4. So this one, it is a high graded copy. I mean, only 5 graded higher out of a total of 89, but there are some that are much, much higher grade than this book. Now, this is, quote, lower grade, compared to some of the other books in this collection, a 7.5 versus a lot of these 9.6s and 9.8s. But that's what was seen with this collection for the earlier books. When the collector was younger, they didn't tend to take as good a care of the books, so they aren't in as high a grade as the later books. This is a book from 1941, so this is very early in the lifespan of this collection. All right, now number 8, we're back to another CGC 9.8. This is a 9.8 of Marvel Mystery Comics number 66. Now, this is a stunning book. I mean, a 9.8 from a World War II era Alex Schomburg cover. This is a Japanese World War II Alex Schomburg cover. Has the Human Torch as well as Toro on there and a Japanese Death Ray. It's actually I believe this is the last Japanese World War II cover in this run. And it looks like they're kind of in a blimp or something like that over probably, I'm guessing, a US city. So just a very cool cover. Now, the price of this book was $45,600, and this is the single highest graded copy on the census. There is one in a 9.6, and then there are 2 in a 9.2, so there are a few really high grade copies of this book. But honestly, this sale actually seemed kind of low to me. In the prior auction, we were generally seeing books like this breaking that $100,000 mark or getting close to it. This was $45,600, and I mean, that's not an amount of money to sneeze at. I mean, that's a lot of money for a book, but for a World War II Alex Schomburg cover to sell for $45,600, I was definitely expecting more out of this book. And so it could be the shine is wearing off on this pedigree just a little bit, or it's maybe just a little bit of a lull, or somebody got a great deal, I don't know, but I was definitely expecting this book to go for more than this. All right, now number 7, this is a CGC 9.6, also Marvel Mystery Comics, issue number 57. And this is another World War II era cover, but it is not a World War II cover itself. This is Human Torch and Toro, and they've got a woman tied up being tortured that they're saving, so pretty classic style for these early Golden Age books. The price was $48,000. And this is also the single highest graded copy on the census. There is one in a 9.4 right behind it. There are none in a 9.8. And like the last sale, with a World War II era cover with Alex Schomburg having a kind of a female bondage cover, usually those books I expect, especially with the highest graded copy, I was thinking this was going to be one that was up in the 80,000, around 100,000 based on the prior auction. Definitely a lot lower, 48,000, still a lot of money, but lower than I was expecting for this book. All right, now number 6, this is a CGC 9.4, again, Marvel Mystery Comics, but this is issue number 63. Now, this is a very popular issue. This is a very in-demand issue because this is a World War II cover. This is Alex Schomburg cover with Hitler on the cover, and those tend to be the most in-demand issues from these different runs. And it doesn't feature Captain America, but it does have the Human Torch and Toro on it, and it sold for also $48,000, so it matched the sale from number 7. And this is the single highest graded copy on the census. There is one in a 9.2 right behind it. The next closest after that is all the way down at an 8.0. So these two copies are definitely quite a bit higher in grade than anything else on a census. Again, seemed like a weak sale to me. I mean, especially with a World War II cover, a Hitler cover by Alex Schomburg. I was, again, thinking that this book would be getting up near $100,000, especially based on that last auction. But we'll have to see what happens moving forward with these future Promise Collection auctions, because it seems like maybe the sales are starting to get a little closer to what you might expect with fair market value, not seeing quite the multiple with these books that we were seeing in that first sale. All right, so now that I'm halfway through the list, I'm going to open this box here. So like I said, I did pick up a book from the Promise Collection in one of the weekly auctions. And so this was one that I felt like it went for a good price, whether it was the Promise Collection or not. I thought with respect to fair market value with this book, I thought it went for a good price. So I decided to pick it up. because, I mean, there are some pedigrees that I will definitely pay a premium for. I've mentioned the Okajima pedigree. That is one definitely would pay a huge premium for. The Mile High pedigree definitely commands a pretty significant premium. But this pedigree is too new to really say for sure if the premium is justified yet. So I really want to be cautious with purchasing books from it and make sure that if I'm buying a book from it, I'm buying it based on the book itself, not paying a premium for the pedigree at this time. And we'll see over time if that pedigree actually starts or continues to command a premium over other similar books that are of non-pedigree. And so this is actually the first time that I've gotten one of these pedigree books with their new label. I've had the tuxedo label that they made maybe about a year or two ago. I just had the regular old blue labels with pedigrees, but I've never had this new gold, or kind of like metallic looking label. It definitely looks pretty cool. So this is the book I picked up. It's Pep Comics number 50. So this is a Archie book where you've got Veronica on the cover, which I thought was made it a cool cover, and you've got the shield and the black hood there. And this is not the highest graded book, it's a 6.5. It's not one of these 9.8s, or something like that. But yeah, that label really does look sharp. You can see it's kind of got like a metallic look to it. I think that looks pretty cool. So yeah, cool book. Like I said, Archie and Veronica. With Archie books, if you've noticed, I do buy a few different Archie books. I do like picking them up when they're from the 40s. I like picking those books up from the 40s. I think that is kind of like early enough that I think they're relatively rare in that era, and so I do like to get those if I can. And I thought this was a good price, like I said, either pedigree or not. And it's a sharp looking book, a 6.5 for a book from 1944. That looks pretty great. There's definitely some tanning and that kind of thing around the edges and a little bit of chipping, but overall a very nice looking book. So I thought this was a cool book to pick up. All right, so with that, let's get back into this top 10 list. And at number 5, we have just an awesome book. I talked about this in my kind of like preview video for the Promise Collection. And this is a CGC 9.2 of Suspense Comics number 8. And this is just a classic L.B. Cole cover where he's got the spider with the human skull on it. And it's from 1945, super creepy cover, and a very popular book for this Golden Age artist. Now the price was $60,000, just a pretty solid sale for this book. Now this is the single highest graded copy on the census, and it's by a ton. The next closest are 3 copies at a 7.5. There are only 57 copies on the census, so this 9.2 is just way up there. Now I do have a copy of this book, so this one is mine, and you can see here it's not a 9.8, but it is a 1.8, and it's got like a piece kind of like missing out of the corner here, but in general I think it presents pretty well for a 1.8, so I'm pretty happy with this book. But just for me, it's cool to have a copy of this book, especially with only 57 copies being on the census. Now, this sale again was lower than what I was expecting. I thought the sale might get up into the $70,000 to $80,000 range based on what we saw with the Mass Comics 1 and 2 books, especially since this was the highest graded copy on the census. But this was a big record for this book. I mean, a 7.0, the prior record was for a 7.0, and that sold for $7,200 back in 2019. So at $60,000, I mean, it set the record by 53 grand. I mean, that is a huge sale, but I guess I was just expecting a little more based on what we saw with the prior Promise Collection sale. All right, now number 4, and this is a CGC 9.4 of Superboy number 1. And this is the first issue of a long-running series. It's got Superman on the cover. It was a pretty big sale. Again, it was one that I thought might break 100,000, but it didn't get there. It sold for $72,000. It's the single highest graded copy on the census. There are 3 and a 9.2 right below it, and then 2 and a 9.0. So there are a few copies up in that 9 range for this book. It's from 1949, so it's definitely a little later in this collector's collection, but Superboy isn't all that popular of a character, so it's not real surprising that it didn't get up to quite as high numbers, but being the single highest graded copy, I thought it maybe had a chance to get up into that $100,000 range. But the prior record was a 9.2 that sold for $31,000 in September of last year. So this is still a big sale. I mean, this got sold for over twice what that 9.2 sold for. And so definitely a big sale. Just, I thought, based on what we had seen with this pedigree earlier, that it might go for more. So again, I think maybe just a little bit of shine coming off that pedigree. All right, now number 3, and this was a book that I was not surprised to see up near the top. This is a CGC 9.0 of Terrific Comics number 5. This is another book that I talked about in my preview video, and this is a World War II era Alex Schomburg bondage torture cover. It's got hooded villains on the cover, and those types of books with an Alex Schomburg cover are just always in very high demand. Now, this book came out in September of 1944. This is about 5 months after the Suspense Comics number 3, which also had the hooded villains. It's one of Schomburg's most famous covers of all time, probably one of his most expensive covers of all time. But this one sold for $75,000. This is a big sale for this book. I thought that was a very solid sale. This was the single highest graded copy on the census, and that's at a 9.0. I mean, a lot of these other books have 9.2s, 9.4s. This one, single highest graded copy at a 9.0. There's 1 in an 8.5 and 3 in an 8.0, so there are a couple real close to it. Now, the prior record for this book was $32,400 for an 8.0 back in November of 2020. So yes, this was a strong sale. Thought maybe it would go a little more, but still a very solid sale, setting a record for this book. All right, so now we're into the top 2, and this is where we finally break above $100,000 for this auction. And the first one, number 2, is a CGC 9.8 of Suspense Comics number 11. And this is another classic L.B. Cole cover, and this is a book that I was not surprised, again, to see this one near the top. I actually didn't think this one was going to break 100,000. I thought it would be close, so this was a very strong sale for this book. It's this classic L.B. Cole devil cover where he's sprinkling money over people and they're fighting over that money. Sold for $132,000. I thought that was a really strong sale. And at the 9.8, this is the single highest graded copy on the census. Next closest is that there are 2 in a 9.4, so there's none in a 9.6, so it has a couple steps above the next closest graded copies. Now, there's not much else to say about this book except it's just incredible. It is crazy to see this book in a 9.8. I do really hope that this collection has a Suspense Comics number 3, the book that I mentioned previously with the Alex Schomburg cover. I think if they have one of those and it's in a high grade, that is definitely a book that could potentially set the new record for a non-hero Golden Age book. That record is currently held by Phantom Lady number 17 at $456,000 at the last Promise Collection sale. But if there's a high grade Suspense Comics 3, I think that one could definitely beat that number. Now, this is another book that I do have a copy of, and it is also on my not for sale list. And this is my copy, again, a 1.8. And this one, it looks really nice from the front cover. The main thing is the back cover has this piece missing. It's also, they drew this guy smoking, whether it's a joint or whatever it is on the back cover. So kind of a fun extra for this book. But the front cover presents really well, and for me with these lower grades, that's what's most important to me. And so I think this is one of my favorite books. I love this book, and one that I picked up on Instagram. So these are these books that you can find books anywhere. It's crazy where you can find some of these really rare Golden Age books. My Suspense Comics 8 I also picked up on Instagram. So both of those books, that's where I got those. So just remember, always keep your eyes open. You never know where you're going to find some of these rare books. You never know where they're going to pop up. Now, we're at the number 1 sale. This was the biggest sale of this auction. And this was one that was definitely not a surprise. This was the one that I said I thought would be the biggest sale of the auction, and it really had the lead in terms of bids from basically the beginning. And this was a CGC 9.4 of Marvel Family number 1. And this is the first appearance of Black Adam, and with all the hype around that character and The Rock playing that character in the upcoming movie for DC, it's not a surprise that we're seeing a big jump in demand for this book. Now, the price was $186,000, which was definitely a record for this book. Now, again, this was a lot lower, though, than what we saw with the prior Promise Collection auction, where we had 2 books that sold for $456,000. So this is less than half of that, and this was the highest book for this sale. Now, this is not the single highest graded copy, but it is tied as the highest graded copy of this book. I didn't think this book was going to break 200, and it didn't, but it definitely got close. I mean, $186,000, super strong sale for this book. And the other thing that I think is just really crazy when you look at the sales for this book is how much the price of this book has gone up over just the last 10 years. So I was looking at prior sales, and an 8.5 of this book sold for $1,525 just in 2013. This year, a 3.0 sold for $12,000 in July. So this book has definitely exploded, way more demand and popularity for this character, and so it will really be interesting to see what happens with this character, with that property, when they make this movie with The Rock, and we'll see if they have a kind of like a continued series or how they continue to use it if it's successful. So with that, that is the top 10 sales from this most recent Promise Collection Pedigree auction. I would say it definitely was a successful auction because there were a lot more of those filler type books that I mentioned. But like I said, there were lower sales numbers than what I was expecting for a lot of these books. I thought some of these books would have gotten up near 100,000 and they were selling more around 40 or 50,000, but still that is a lot of money for a book regardless, and so you never know. It's always dependent on who's there, who's bidding, but these 410 books did sell for over $3.5 million, so definitely not money to sneeze at. Just a very impressive set of books. Now, I am, again, really looking forward to seeing what else comes out of this Promise Collection, because we do know there are some other big books out there that have not been auctioned yet, like that Batman one, like that Captain America Comics #1. So looking forward to seeing those. So if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. I've got more videos over here if you'd like to watch some of my other videos, and the subscription button right here if you'd like to subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video.